Hello and welcome back. I'm Richard Burton from the Richard Burton Watercolour channel here at Bempton on the Yorkshire coast. And today we're going to do another reflection scene. This time we're going inland. We're going to Knaresborough. We're going to the River Nid. We're going to deal with some trees, reflections and a rowing boat. Quite different from our coastal scenes. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge. It's going to be an interesting one to do. We're going to do some deep reflections, some wonderful soft moving water, and again, we'll see how it goes. And before I forget, I must remind you that I've got this new watercolour guide for those of you who've been following me, and those of you that are maybe the first time you've seen this. We've got this guide. This is a sort of, if you're new to watercolour or you're just coming back to watercolour, you might find this useful. It's in the link below. It's totally free. It's just 5 tips into watercolour, get you started again, and you might find it useful. I'm sure you will find it useful. Please, just take a grab, just grab your copy and use it at your leisure. So now, without further ado, let's get down to the painting. Okay, so we'll start with the drawing. The key is we're looking at this rowing boat on the River Nid, Knaresborough, and we're looking down on the subject. And we're going to have effectively 2/3 of the composition will be reflections and 1/3 sky. So it's important that we get those proportions right. The drawing, I need to be careful around the boat, make sure the proportions of the boat are correct. So we need to get those width to length accurate as much as we can. And then I'm also going to try and get the boat compound with the other boats on the edge of the river as accurate as I possibly can. There's not going to be too much drawing in it because a lot of it's going to be diffused washes and painting in the trees and the such like, really drawing with the brush. But nonetheless, just carefully putting these elements together will be a good start. Right, so we're going to start with the painting, and the first thing is to deal with the sky. I'm going to wet the paper and leave that to soak in and then get to that moist surface, and then onto that surface I'm going to use cobalt blue and a little bit of crimson and let them blend and diffuse together, and that will give me a lovely high level sky. And then as I come down, I'm going to now mix a green using Prussian blue, lemon yellow and a little bit of yellow ochre. And then I'm going to diffuse that, a range of colours, a range of mixes, and start putting in with the woodland in the backdrop, which is going to be crucial. It wants to be diffused, and I'm gradually going to build that up with a few more darks as I go on the damp. And the darks are going to be Prussian blue and a little bit of burnt umber to give that effect, and drop those in on the dark. And I'm also going to use a little bit of crimson to give some further shadow, and that'll blend in, but I'm going to blend it carefully on the diffused surface. And then when I've established that, I'm then going to use this new Da Vinci brush, and it's got a nice edge on it. It's got a very much like a fan brush, but it's a minimal fan brush. It's really nice, and that will produce some wonderful effects for the trees on the horizon, and it will give some wonderful broken foliage effects. It's really sort of useful. You can use a normal fan brush, but as I say, this is one that I'm just trying at the moment, and it's a really exciting opportunity to try something new. And as you can see, you can give some really interesting effects, particularly on the horizon with those trees that are just silhouetting against a lovely sky. Now as we come down, I'm going to put in the little bit of selected detail in the distance, just that feeling of the boats and the jetty, and obviously the little cafe there, just put a little bit of interest in that, using a selection of greys and a little bit of Venetian red just to give that little bit of warmth to the structures. And then as I move towards the left, I've then got that big area of foreground foliage, which is weeping willow type trees and other summer like grasses that are overhanging the water. There a lot of energy in there, a lot of colour in there, so I'm going to use more cadmium yellow in the mix with Prussian blue to just give it that vibrancy really that I'm after. Probably a little bit of cobalt turquoise as well, just to give it a lift. And I'm going to drop that in on the left, and then as I drop it in, I'm going to mix some dark and just diffuse those darks in carefully. Again, I'm going to probably do a little bit of that with this fan brush as well and drop those darks in the fan, so it'll just give a little bit of texture and a little bit of shape. And experimenting really on the left here. This will work, hopefully. It will just give that nice feeling of energy to the foliage on the left, which will hopefully really will help us when we get further on with the painting. Okay, so now we're moving on to the rowing boat with a little chap there rowing. And what we're going to do with first is going to be the mahogany lines, so the distinctive lines on the side of the boat. I'm going to work my way into the boat from there. We're going to use burnt sienna with a little bit of burnt umber and a tiny touch of red. Cadmium red is ideal for that. And put those distinct lines in place, just carefully with a small brush. I'm also going to then add a little bit of yellow ochre just to make it a little bit more yellow, a bit richer. And then I'm going to put the oars in place, and that will get the essential colours of the side of the boat and the oars. Then I'm going to move on to the rear seat, which is a blue, cobalt blue and ultramarine blue. Just drop that in carefully, diffuse it a little bit so it's not just a singular mass of colour. Add a little bit of water, it will just help make the colour sparkle a little bit more. And then, which is going to be the key to the boat really, is trying to get that roundness, that whole shape to the boat. Well, that is done. by putting some water on the boat to start off with, which will just diffuse in, and then I'm going to use some raw umber and carefully just drop that into there. That will then diffuse in, and then while that is diffusing, I'm going to make some grey, which can be ultramarine and burnt umber, and I'm going to just drop that into the lower part of the boat, and that will then diffuse to give that feeling of shape. And then I can, once that's soaked in, I can then just exaggerate that a little bit more and put in the planks of the boat using the same grey, and that will complete the shape of the overall feel of the boat. Then I'm left with putting the figure in which case it's just going to be the initial tones. So he's got a jacket on, and he's got a bit of a satchel at the back, and so I'm going to put those in using a series of greys, ultramarine blue, burnt umber, burnt sienna, with a little bit of crimson, just to give that little bit of greyness to it and three-dimensional feel, just make it stand a bit prouder. Put those in and ensure that you just manage to get some extra strong marks, strong greys in, and so it'll just give a little bit more shape to the figure, and that'll finish at this stage. Now we come to the magic bit, which is painting the water, which is really the bit that makes the whole thing sparkle and come together. So we're going to start with trying to capture those ripples, and those ripples on the water. Now when I say ripples, it's just that little bit of moving water. It's background wash purely. It's not the shadows, and it's not the larger ripples and the larger shadows. It's not those at all. It's just the very soft ripples. Now this is done by wetting the paper first, obviously wet around the boat, and careful with that so you don't go any water onto the boat. And then once you've done that, I'm going to mix some cobalt blue and a little bit of crimson separate, so I can apply those separately. But firstly, the main one is going to be cobalt blue with a little bit of Venetian red or light red, which is going to give a silver colour, and I'm going to apply that in the distance and just let it diffuse in. As I bring the brush down, I'm then going to bring that all round, but then I'm going to utilise some crimson, put some crimson in, just some drifts of crimson, and then I'm going to put some drifts of cobalt blue, and just let those softly, gently float on the surface, and that will give a lovely effect of ripples. The thing to watch for here is not to be too pale. I easily be too pale and you just lose it, because the thing is they dry so much lighter, so you just got to compensate for that. If you want to, at the end of the day, when it's dry, we want to see those soft undulations of colour, which give that feeling of reflecting the sky on a slowly moving water. If you can do that, it will be in a good place to finish this picture. Okay, so now we've done the underwash and the ripples, quite comfortable with those. Now we're going to put in the real reflections, which are going to start from the distance. So we're going to start from the water line, and we're going to bring that down, mix some darks, which are going to reflect the trees and the deep darker in the trees. So I'm going to use ultramarine, burnt sienna, cobalt turquoise, those with a little bit of crimson, and vary those so that you get more dark and lights, particularly dark along the water's edge. Bring that down on a wet bed of water on the paper, a bead of colour as I come down, and then as I gradually come down, I change the colour slightly, so you've got a little bit more green in that middle area, and then it's going to have a little bit more crimson, and then a little bit more back to a dark again. Bring that round through and off to the left. Now off to the right, when you come out, you've got that diffused ripply type water that's reflecting, and that needs just to be, I've used the side of the brush technique. Unfortunately, I don't think it quite worked this time, so what we've done, we've let it dry, and then I've go back on it and wet it again, and then I've softened and diffused the colours so we've got the effect that we want. And then I've brought that down around the boat, again dropping some darker underneath the boat, diffuse it into the boat, to the side of the boat, and just keep those ripples, clear lines of ripples from the oars, and then bring that round to finishing off on the left under the bushes and the trees that are overhanging the water. Make sure I get some lovely strong deep dark there, and then that is the final effect. and keep an eye on it. Just let it diffuse, and then once I've done that, I've then looked at it and I can see I've probably got it a little bit darker than probably what we wanted, but mainly because we've gone over it. So what I've done is I've rebalanced the trees in the background and just made them a little bit darker, brought it a few dark to give some balance to it, and that in effect gives me the final picture. Alongside then the very final touches are just to add a little bit of colour in the foreground, redefine the figure, take the masking fluid off and add a little bit of colour to his hat, and just lighten up the figure and add a bit of highlights here and there, and then we have the picture. Now we've got this other painting. This is another attempt that I've done at the River Nid at Knaresborough. This time what we've done, we've got the reflections in the water in the first go really, and not overworked it, just kept it sort of on a simple diffused wash, and I think in effect I've got that little bit more varied colour in the reflections. And obviously we put a second person in the boat just to give a little bit of extra interest, and I hope you enjoy this one. I hope you like the effect. You can see the effects are very similar, but we've just got that little bit more energy and movement in the water, I think, really, on this one. Anyway, you have a look, compare the two, and please make your own comments. Make some comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if you've got any challenges with water, please don't forget, do put some comments, and we'll endeavour to try and come back to you and give you a bit of advice if we can. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the process. An interesting process today. A few warts and all, a few mistakes here that we've had to sort of correct and just get into place. What I've done here is I've put the mount round the picture that we demonstrated. As you can see, as usual, I'll show it off. You've had a good look at it and you've now seen it. Obviously, we've dealt with that water, that soft moving, big reflections, the big deep colours, and hope you've enjoyed the process. Alongside that, you've got that other one that I wanted to show you with the two people in the rowing boats, which was another way, and you can actually compare the two. You can see how actually this time I got the water reflections without having to go over them again, and you can see they've probably got a little bit more sparkle about it than the first one. So you can compare the techniques. In actual fact, if you can get the water right the first time, it does tend to just have that little bit more magic about it, and it just sits that little bit better. Nonetheless, the other one, we've pulled it out, but you can obviously see we've got a deeper and sort of denser reflection. But so it's an interesting process, and I hope you enjoyed it. So without further ado, I'm going to say Firstly, a big thank you to all of you that's been following us for some time. We've now hit over 1,700 subscribers, which is a massive achievement, really, and it's down to you. Big thank you for that. And so obviously, in order to keep us getting out to a wider audience, we're going to ask you please to like and subscribe once again. And I hope you're enjoying it. And so the only thing left for me to say now is to say, keep painting and enjoy.